Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Hope y'all are doing well. Thanks for tuning in. Today, so usually if you've seen me on Fridays at 12, I've probably been talking about things like self-sovereign identity and different ways to do data storage and global payments. But today I'm talking about AI. I've been diving into AI agents a bit. I used to be more in depth with the LLM world, but now I'm diving into AI agents. And today we're particularly talking about building AI agents that developers can trust. And we're also going to learn about a specific AI agent called Goose and how we can extend that. We're going to see a really cool demo from Brad. So I'm going to bring him up real quick. Hey, Brad, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So before we dive into all the tech and stuff like that, I like to liven up the conversation with I don't know, some question that has nothing to do with tech. So my question to you, I was gonna say what's your favorite holiday, but that's boring. What holiday do you dislike?
Yeah, okay, that's actually tough. I like all the big ones. So you can't, I don't know that you can, say anything about like the winter holidays or Halloween or anything. Maybe, so Veterans Day is coming up and we no longer get that as a work break. So I'll call that one out as just because our time off doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, you're like, I hate it because I'm gonna be working still.
Yeah, I just have
Okay.
to work the whole day. It's not a holiday.
I don't know if people would hate me for this, but I'm not a big fan of Halloween because I don't know, I never experienced it as a kid, so I just watched other people do it, so I'm like, it's whatever to me. Tanya said she dislikes Valentine's Day. I don't know if anybody else. All right, and Tanya said she loves Halloween. I know other people would, and I probably sound like the Grinch of Halloween. But all right, so let's dive into your artificial intelligence journey. Like I looked at your LinkedIn, you've been in the machine learning AI world for a while. Like what really drew you to AI, Brad?
Yeah, I definitely started in just applied machine learning. Uh, and that's and I actually took a pivot into kind of working on platform. And when LLMs came along, the first thing we needed to do just immediately was figure out how to host these things and do inference. Uh, but the moment that we started getting the infrastructure set up to do that, it just became obvious how fun and interesting it was to use it day to day, and you could just immediately see how it applies to your work. And so that's definitely what got me started. Is I was building AI platforms using AI to help me write code, and then just realized immediately that agents were the way to accelerate that.
Okay, I have a dumb question. What's the difference between machine learning and AI?
Not a dumb question, because I think it is as much a media thing as it is a technical thing. At some point, the models got big enough that they started to uh, feel qualitatively different to people, and I think that's when people started calling it AI. But obviously, the same architecture we're using today is what we would call machine learning 3 years ago. It just had less parameters and felt less like talking to a human.
Ah, interesting. Thank you for that clarification. And okay, I have a couple more questions before we really dive into the demo too. That I've seen a lot of controversial takes on AI agents and stuff like that. So I'm just curious on what are your thoughts around the current state of AI agents and what are some current limitations of AI agents that you want to see solved?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that we're underusing them almost for sure. Especially it moves really quickly, but especially the last couple of model releases from the main providers like OpenAI and Anthropic have really pushed agents into a spot where they can do real world problems very efficiently. It's super impressive. I think hopefully we'll see some of that today. It's cool. So I think the big thing with agents is that it works fantastic, and we should be using more of it. Limitations, I think, are actually uh, this is only recently true, like in the last couple of months, but I think the limits are on the system side of the problem, not the agent side. So what is it that your agent can connect to and do? And so right now it's actually kind of a lot of glue, like writing a lot of code to get them new capabilities. And that's going to change really quickly, right? Because that's not a machine learning or research problem anymore. That's just everyone doing some engineering to connect new tools to the agents and make them do new things.
So you think it's a system problem? I think that's actually really, really interesting. Really quickly, I'll just say hi to a couple of people who are in here. Hey, Andre, good morning. And hey, Max. Hey, BTG. Hey, Adewale. Hey, thanks for like joining us. We're talking about AI agents, and as the title says, I'm gonna ask this next. Um, oh, hey to Arjan. Hope I said your name right. So the title says like building AI agents developers can trust. When I worked at GitHub, right? I did a lot of GitHub Copilot stuff, and I know that's not an AI agent, but it's like an AI developer tool, coding assistant. A big, huge issue that like I had to like convince or persuade people about is like developers didn't trust AI to like code for them. And I'm curious, like, what approach have you taken in building Goose to make it more trustworthy for developers?
I think one of
If
the big things is, yeah. So for me, I think like we have systems in place for trust because code has always been multi-author, right? Like at any big scale, we always want to have ways to know that whoever's contributing is like improving the project and not making anything break. And so that's like the testing side of things. And even stuff like compilation, right? When it's a compiled language. And so I think connecting the code generation into the stack that evaluates it, like letting it run tests, letting it write new tests, and then sending it up to like through the pull request process gives me a lot of trust that I can like be happy with the results that I got. And then every time that I get one of those and I merge something into the main code base that was written by I like get better and better understanding of where it works well and where it doesn't.
That makes sense to me. I agree that you did put a lot of compilation stuff like that. And then I also like the fact that you or I don't know if you directly or other people within the team have added like things like goose hints or plans that like allow it to have a little bit more context. Because sometimes AI hallucinates, and it's like I wish sometimes you're like, dang, I wish I could give ChatGPT or I don't know. I've never used Devin, but whatever, like whatever coding assistant that's out there, you're like, I wish I could let it see exactly what I'm trying to do, and I think
Right.
that also helps. And I'm curious, what inspired you to necessarily create Goose? Like, what was like the thing that you were like, oh, I need to make this? Maybe someone on your team was like, you need to make this, but I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you had like a little eureka moment.
No, I mean it's definitely a thing that has been um there's been iterations of this for a long time, right? So GitHub Copilot was great, and I used it for a while myself, and I found that getting line completions was like really helpful, but it didn't go as far as I wanted it to. And so I was switching to chat modes of different models and like asking them to do bigger and bigger problems. And then I spent a lot of my day like copying and pasting, or like tweaking things and moving it around, and then I could ask it for help on like shell commands or like, okay, how would I compile and test this? Um, and I just realized that there was like the missing ingredient of just like connecting the model directly to the ability to run those tests and do compilation and things like that. And um, that actually like the idea being that you could start that loop and then walk away from it for a while. So you could let the model run with the testing and the code and have it like iterate and improve things. So yeah, tried to set up Goose. This was like several model iterations ago, so it like kind of worked, but also wasn't great. And then, but it was fun because when it worked, it was impressive. And then now though, a couple model releases later, it works almost every time, and so it's really actually become something that I use every day.
I love that. And I think that makes sense. I think when Copilot first came out and even after, like people were like, I like this, but I want something a little bit more powerful than that. And then let me see what other things I have a lot of questions, but I want to kind of just go through some of them a little bit faster. What drove your trying to figure out, okay, there's three things, right? You have the ability to add your own LLM provider, and I think you kind of touched on that just now. You also have the Goose written in Python, and you've taken a CLI based approach. I'm curious what drove your decision for all three of those things, because most like AI coding assistants I've seen so far, they have kind of like a little user interface. You can interact with it and all that. So I'm like, why go CLI first? And then why choose Python? And then uh, why choose the ability to like enable people to just plug in their own LLM provider?
Yeah, right, for sure. And I think the answer to the first two questions is the same. So like we built a CLI and we wanted it to be model agnostic, both for both reasons, so that we could be flexible and like iterate quickly. And so the CLI is great because uh, it's like a place that most people are already doing a lot of their coding work, so you can jump right into their workflow there. But it's easy to build, right? And so a lot of the stuff we're doing is just text, and so CLI's got like the baseline capabilities for that, and it's letting us move fast on like new ideas. And I think we'll show some of that today, like some stuff we can just drop right into a CLI and it works well. Um, that all helped us build something quickly. I actually do think that there's home for like a UX here in the future, like, but we want to figure it out, and we'll probably like put out some prototypes in the open source in the not so distant future. That'll be fun. Um, and then Python's a good question. So we built Python because that's where all of our ML people have experience, right? And in the industry too, it's where the libraries come first and where there's the most framework support. Um, but we've like found along the way that we don't actually use a lot of libraries for these agents. We built a lot from scratch because actually like the foundational models do all the heavy lifting and we really just need to integrate with them. And then Python has been difficult to get people to just get it installed and like get going. So that's a big challenge. And so I actually think we'll probably put up a GitHub community post later today and talk about maybe a language switch to something compiled so that we can like distribute a binary and just make sure that anybody's system, no matter like where they're at, they can just like get Goose installed quickly and get started.
I'm excited for maybe the UI and maybe switching to another language where it can be compiled. Because I do agree with you. It does make it easier. You're already coding, you already have your terminal open, so why not like type it in? But I do think like to gain more adoption, it could be exciting to add a UI for people who like they want to code, they want to build something, but maybe they're not like the strongest developer. So that could be like a cool thing to try out. And then
Yeah.
the compiling thing, I'm excited for that as well. Because I remember at TBD we were switching over to Rust to make it easy to manage a whole bunch of
Yeah.
SDKs and different programming languages. So this could be my opportunity to learn. All right. So we're gonna switch into something that Goose has a feature called toolkits, right? And basically, the way I understand toolkits is it kind of adds extensibility to Goose, and like basically, in addition to whatever like the flat like the baseline is at Goose, you can add in your own features where it can like browse the web or it could take screenshots or whatever you want it to do. I'm curious about your decision to make Goose extensible through like plugins and toolkits.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is like really key. So the thing that Goose ships with is and just to say it, like, so agents and tools, I think a lot of people use that terminology already. So tools are what the agent is capable of like calling and executing to like give it the ability to go out into the world and do things. And then toolkits are a concept we added to say like, okay, here's a collection of tools that work well together that let you do something new. And the core toolkit of Goose is a developer toolkit. So it's like read and write files, run shell commands. And that goes a long way, right? Because with shell commands and editing files, you can kind of do anything in the coding world to a lot of ways. But if you give it more capabilities through toolkits, it can shortcut it and give it like new surface areas it's going to tackle. And so that's why we wanted plugins, right? Is like it can be a lot of work to figure out with shell commands how to do something new with Goose. So if you give it a toolkit, it can jump right into it. And people have used this for all kinds of things, like running board games or like interacting with your screen or a browser. to like actually let it do like things beyond what the shell can. So that's exciting for sure. And then even in the shell or in like a programming space, toolkits can also just like give it a structure around some of the questions you're answering and make it smarter about solving problems.
Love that. And would you be able to, right before you give us your demo, one, tell us what's your favorite toolkit that exists so far, and then kind of explain how, well, let's do that first. And then, yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite so
So
far?
my favorite toolkit is the GitHub toolkit, and it is a very simple toolkit, but it's like just a couple of key ingredients that let Goose go out there and like check out pull requests and look at comments and then even address them. So that's, I think, fantastic. So if I have a PR with like a bunch of like small changes I need to make, I can just tell Goose like, look at that and please implement all the changes, and it usually works. Yeah.
That's cool. My favorite one is the one that Max showed. It was last week or 2 weeks ago where well, he has a couple. He did like the Goose Talk to Me. I think that's still in development.
Yeah.
And then he had the one that browses the web. I thought that was pretty cool. Oh wait, can you show us, like, can you explain how the toolkit system kind of works? And then feel free to dive into the demo as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, let me show you real quick. This is in the Goose plugins repo, which is like kind of a place to incubate like any ideas you have. So it doesn't necessarily have to work for everyone here. It's more just like fun ways to use Goose. And so here's one toolkit. These are pretty simple Python classes. And the majority of what this has to do is like give instructions to the LLM about how to operate the toolkit. And so you have this like Python-based class called toolkit, and you're going to inherit from it, and you have to implement a system prompt, which explains to the LLM like what's going on. So this is like kind of a long line here. But for this Vincent Van Code toolkit in the example, it's telling it that you can like create images from inputs. So you can create it from code, or you can create it from different like natural language queries. And so that's just like the instructions for the LLM that gets combined with other prompts to Goose. And then the tools here are kind of natural Python functions, and they're decorated. And so those just say like, these are the literal capabilities that the model can call, like create image. And what's fun about this like SDK in Python is that the doc strings are actually the instructions to the LLM. So the LLM sees this instruction, like create an image based on a prompt, and then the annotations on the arguments and whatnot. So that's like how the LLM figures out what it needs to provide to the tools.
Okay, interesting. Keep going.
Yeah. So I figured I think we could work. It's going to take like 15, 30 minutes, but I think we could go through making a new toolkit today. And we'll start with this code as reference. I think one of the things that's fun about working with like toolkits is there's a lot of flexibility on like how you want to build it. So I think we can like kind of explore a couple of ideas. And so the thing I was going to start with today was trying to make a data analysis toolkit, something that can like run queries and understand data and then visualize it.
Exciting.
So let me get started. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying this is exciting.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, feel free to point out too how to like get into development mode and stuff like that for folks.
Yeah. And so of course, to build a Goose toolkit, we're going to use Goose. So I'm going to be running this in the local mode. So this is like UV run is like running my local copy of Goose in development. And I think actually, let me talk about the Goose hints since we mentioned that. That'll be a good way to get started. So I'm going to create a Goose hints right here. And this is going to be just extra instructions to Goose. So I'm just going to write like in a file, kind of markdown formatted usually works well. So I'm going to talk about toolkits. So I'll say like this repo contains a collection of toolkits. You can get an example at source/toolkit/artify. And then I'll tell it what I was just describing. To implement a toolkit, you need to minimally create a system function that returns instructions, and you can add any number of tools. The doc strings are important. Follow the example. So that'll be the instructions we give to Goose. And so now if I do this, if I run Goose, because there's like a Goose hints locally, I can say like, can you share what you know about toolkits? And so it should have picked up this like pretty small set of instructions. And
I actually have a question about that. So I'm kind of curious on like for hints, like is there any like specific ways that we need to give instructions or ways that it works better with it, or it just doesn't matter? And then I guess we can do this while it's processing. And then also like is there like a hierarchy of influence? Will like Goose choose the hints over something else at a certain point?
Right. So the hints are kind of on the level playing field with other things like the toolkit and the original system instructions. So they all go into the model system prompt. And then again, like a couple months ago, I would have had like a lot of like really specific and funny instructions for how to prompt these LLMs because they were more finicky. But like, you know, things like there's a lot of old approaches like offering them tips or whatever. That's kind of a joke, but like that kind of stuff used to matter. And then more and more, I think they just get it. And it's actually the model quality is improving enough that you mostly just tell it in English, like what you would normally tell another developer. And it tends to work out these days. You can, if something's getting ignored, you can do like markdown bold and caps, you know, make sure to, that kind of works. Like stuff like that can help. But for the most part, I don't need to do it as much anymore.
That's cool. Okay, thank you. And yeah, someone commented this is Inception because we're using Goose to create Goose toolkit. Okay, go ahead.
This is how most of Goose development goes now, which is like, okay, we're using Goose to write Goose. It speeds itself up.
Awesome.
And so, okay, so then it did get back to us, which is this got, and so what's fun about this is I gave it like this much text and it was able to give me this much text, which is pretty cool. And it did that by like actually reading the example code and understanding further. So it's nice that we didn't have to write all of this out for it. And so it's like understanding in detail like how this Vincent van code thing works. And so that like now that it knows what we're talking about, now I can tell it like let's make a new toolkit. So let's call it data. And then I'm thinking, so I know in advance that I probably want to use DuckDB for this. If you haven't heard of DuckDB, probably have. It's pretty popular these days. Yeah. That's great because it's going to be SQL based, and I think the models really are great with SQL, and then it's in memory, so it's easy for me to use. So we'll do DuckDB and start with 3 tools. Let's do load to load data sets from Parquet or CSV. Let's do query to run a query against a loaded data set and return the results. And then last, visualize to show a visualization of the data. And I'll tell it, I think I want to work up to this incrementally and like review what it's doing. So I'm going to let it know to be like kind of iterative instead of all at once. And so let's work iteratively. Start first by scaffolding the toolkit in functions, but not implementing them yet.
I didn't know you could work iteratively with it. This is awesome. Cool.
Yeah, and I like, so I almost always give it a little bit of a hint of like how I want it to work in addition to what, so that it's going to be like, sometimes I do want it to just do the whole thing and get back to me. And then sometimes I really want to like interact with it. And this is kind of instruction set on how to do the work, I think is really helpful.
Awesome. And Max just wrote a comment giving us a bit of a tip. He said, for better readability, do option return for new lines in Goose. Okay, I guess we're maybe there. It's a little hard to read. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I can split it up a bit more. Okay, cool. So we're seeing it write code here, and it did that actually pretty quickly, which is nice. And it also wrote a like test scaffold for me. which is nice. And it's got some stuff wrong, which is like, since I'm familiar with the code base, I can tell already. It's not bad, but I'm going to give it some tips. So what's cool is that it did scaffold this out really well, right? Like that's a lot of code written in a very short amount of time. And I think this this scaffolding makes a lot of sense. Like load looks good, query looks exactly like what we would want it to do, with a couple of minor nits. So let me get in there and tell it some nits, and I'll take advantage of that like multi-line editing. So I'm going to tell it like, okay, the first thing we need to do is that the init method needs to pass kwargs. It gets a notifier and an exchange view. But let's just use kwargs. And then two, the other thing I noticed is that right here, it's got like a complicated return type for the query. So it's like suggesting we make like a list of dict of string. And so that, I think that's too complicated. I would rather just have it return like a formatted string. That's going to be easier for the model to understand. So from the query method, just return a formatted string. And I'll let that get going while I continue like kind of reading what it did. And it's got some placeholder tests that I'm not going to immediately worry about for now. We'll come back to that. Otherwise, another thing I'll do frequently is like check this out in my editor. So if I look in Git now, I can see that there's some added files, and then I can like open that up and like look at it here and make any edits if I want to collaborate with it. And so let's see what it's doing. Okay, so now it's like switching over to this like replace tool, and that's just going to be using to kind of more efficiently fix small edits. Like, okay, so it's rewriting the init function to do the kwargs thing, like I said, change the type hint. That looks good. And then now I'm going to actually just jump into having it start to implement stuff, I think. So let's start by implementing load and query. Just use native for both. So load and query are going to be easy, right? Because like loading a CSV or a Parquet file, DuckDB just has like stuff for that. And querying is like what it's made for. So I think these are going to be pretty simple functions. And you see it's already getting into that right now. So one of the awkward things about working with my editor, at least, is that you like kind of have to like refresh the buffer because Goose is writing it on the side. And in a lot of times, for that reason, I would like use Goose and just let it go for more and more before I even check on what it's done. But for a demo like this, I think we want to see it happening.
Okay, so this particular editor doesn't update it immediately?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll like switch windows and then come back to it and it'll update.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And so let's just review what it's doing. And I like to do like for something like this where I would want to like get this out into the world and make a pull request out of it, I do more or less want to read through all of the code to make sure it's doing what I want it to do. And so it's like doing some like type checking or some like checking on the arguments of the load, which is great. Let me widen this window a bit. And then it's doing what I expected. So we're just going to do a create table as with the read Parquet and read CSV helpers from DuckDB. And then it's going to append the list of table names into some like state management. And I think that looks good, actually. So I have no complaints with that code. And then the second one is the query. And it's going to just run the thing and then grab the results from the cursor and then kind of format it out so that it's like kind of a simple string that it can read. This is the kind of code where I'm like, this probably is right, but there could be a small bug. And rather than like reading every line in detail, I'd rather just try it than like read it. So I think what we're going to do is ask it to implement a test, an integration test rather than a unit test. So can you make a demo that sets up the toolkit, loads the iris data set and runs a query. And so the iris data set, I just like, this is such a popular data set that I know it's going to know how to go find that thing. So I don't even need to get a data set there. I can just bank on it, like looking that up and like downloading it for me.
Okay. That answers the question I was going to ask. I was going to say, how does it know? Do you have it in there? Okay,
Yeah.
keep going.
So super well-known like ML data set. And the only downside is that it's grabbing it from sklearn. And so I got to decide if I want that dependent, that like heavy duty of a dependency. So I actually, I think that's fine. We'll just go with it. And then looking at this code, this part is wrong. So so this makes sense. So then let me actually tell you how I honestly deal with it making mistakes like that. Because sometimes it's faster to just fix it for Goose than to tell Goose how to fix it. And so this toolkit with the data here, it actually needs some arguments to initialize a toolkit. And normally when you run the Goose CLI does all that under the hood. And so it didn't see any examples of that in the references I gave it, so I'm just going to fix it for it. And so what I'm going to do is set up a notifier. And so I'm going to grab a session notifier from this, and then I'm going to set the status indicator to none, because we don't need it for this test. And then I'm going to do notifier equals, and then let's see if that gets us far enough. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to open a new terminal, zoom in a bit, and I'm just going to run on the side to test this while the Goose session, I leave it up. So that's another common thing I'll do, is like have a second terminal so that I can test things after Goose is writing.
Yes.
And so I'm going to do uv run python demo.py, and I'm expecting an error or two, but let's see what happens. Yep, so that's what I expected. So we need, because it's downloading iris for me, we probably need pandas and scikit-learn.
Okay. And I like that you open up a new tab, because I do that too, so it makes me know that I'm going the right way.
Yeah,
Just
okay, so we've got the dependencies to download that iris dataset now. I won't add them to the like dependencies of the repo. It's just more for this like demo that I'm doing it. So that would be something I would keep out of the main dependency set. And then I'm a little bit surprised that's taking so long. It's probably just kind of the overhead of the scikit-learn datasets, but we'll see if we see any more notifications. Nope. Okay, so we've got a bug. And then now I can say, I can actually, I'm going to set up Goose to fix this stuff. So, okay, now try running. So this goes back to that loop I was talking about earlier, right? Like once we actually can connect Goose to the error messages, it's going to be able to do multiple iterations. So it sees this same error I did, and it's going to go fix it. And so this kind of like syntax errors, it's for sure going to be able to track those down and get them working. If there's anything more complicated, we might jump in and help it.
Okay. And just to confirm my suspicion or assumption of how it fixes errors, is it going back to the LLM and saying like, hey, this part is not working as we thought, and then the LLM gives it like a plan to update?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, exactly that. So when it ran this Python demo.py on the shell, it saw the error. It didn't bother saying it because it's just jumping right to a solution. But it saw the error message, and then that goes back to the foundational model, and it continues to like decide to use tools to fix the error.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So it did some cleanup, and then that's fine. It saw an error about the notifier. It did the same thing I did, actually. It was kind of smart about that. So so I was saying I needed to give it a notifier, and it saw the same problem. And so it fixed it a different way, which is fine, and made its own notifier, simple notifier class, which seems great to me. And then it's finding some bugs, which is normal. And then apparently it worked. So let me go back to that other terminal I had. Cool. Okay, so that's fun. So we've got query results coming out, and it's like syntax formatting and stuff looks nice, right? So that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
uh, and I think that's like exactly what we need out of the the two tools. And what we're looking at now, I want to take a quick like sanity check of a thing that Goose might not understand that I understand about building toolkits, which is that we want to make sure that the LLM sees the results of the tools, but we also want to make sure that the human sees the result of the tools. And so, like, I would want, while running Goose, to see this output. I also want the LLM to see the output so that it knows if things are working or if something is going wrong. So let me actually just make some small edits to this code to do that. So when it loads a table, I just want to so I'm letting the LLM right here know that it worked successfully. I'm just going to send the same exact message to the human. And the way that works in the toolkit is self.notifier.log. And so that'll show a message to the person. So this message goes to the person, and then the return value goes to the LLM.
So the notifier, wait, can you explain more? How does the notifier go to the person versus the return going to the model?
Yeah. So like in the current Goose right now, like when you see this like shell python demo.py, that's
Yeah.
from the notifier. Same with like
Oh,
this
okay.
formatting. Yeah.
Okay.
And so what we're going to get by adding that is we're going to see similar things, like these formatted stuff. And I'm going to be a little bit lazy for the sake of the demo, but I'll put in some like placeholder like formatting here, like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then we're going to do the same thing for the query. So the LLM is seeing this like cool result string, and we're going to send that to the human too. Oh, and I need new lines. Almost forgot. Okay, so that's looking good. And then we need to implement visualize. And that's going to be interesting. So I'm going to tell it, I'm going to change this method. And I think what I would like to do actually is like, yeah, let's talk about visualization. We need this to work as terminal output, not as an image. And that's going to make it feel like integrated with Goose. Are there any bash tools that can create visualizations on the CLI? So I'm just going to see if Goose knows of any to recommend.
That's cool to discover it for you.
Yeah, and like part of what's nice about asking it this way is that you want, when you're building tools for the LLM, ideally you want something that they're familiar with. And so if you ask it to recommend something, you kind of immediately know that it knows how that works. And so you might not need to do nearly as much like prompting to get it to use it. So like I obviously knew when we started that the LLM would know what DuckDB is and SQL in general, because like obviously it trained in. But maybe there's some niche plotting libraries that it doesn't know anything about. And I would want to like make sure that we're picking one that it knows about.
And I'm curious, what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was going to ask.
Go ahead.
What model do you usually? Well, what model are you using, and which model do you usually use when you're using Goose? Like, I don't know if you have any particular preference for certain like operations.
Yeah. So there's a couple of trade-offs, and they're kind of constantly getting better and better. The one I'm using for this session is the newest Claude Sonnet, which I think has been the best with the tool use for us that we're doing so far. And that has made a big difference. I'm pretty excited about GPT's 4.0 and the O1 stuff too. But right now, Claude Sonnet seems to give me the best results for like coding, which matters a lot for Goose, obviously. Okay, so it actually jumped right in I maybe should have told it to like hold off a second. And it is trying to use a. This is actually more complicated, so I'm going to interrupt it. Um, okay, well, let me see how far it gets. If it's good, maybe we'll use it. But I'm a little bit suspicious of how much like work it had to do there.
Yeah, you were like, it should have been just an easy
Yeah,
addition.
like that. This is like I was hoping for something more flexible because that's part of what's like when you're making a toolkit, you don't want it to be like you want it to be pretty general purpose because the LLM's the thing that's like piloting it and making it powerful, and so the more you the more general purpose it is, I think the better results you end up with.
Okay.
Okay, and so these don't look great, and that's kind of what I worried about because we're like coding it up from scratch, and I'd rather do something that's like already designed. And so let me actually switch to Google because let me see. So command the line plotting tool. All right, I generally am pretty happy about Hacker News. I think I have seen this before, actually,
Okay.
and this looks great, right? Like that's pretty nice out of the gate, and I think it looks like it's handling the terminal width formatting and stuff. So let me ask Goose if it knows about this. And so I think it didn't suggest this because it's not a Python library. It's like a command line tool, but I think subprocessing out to it would work well. Oh, is it installed already?
Why did it cancel it?
Oh, because I was surprised that it's installed. It is though, which is great.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So, and that showed. So I didn't even think to comment about that, but I did a thing that you often do with Goose, which is I interrupted it, and I did that by hitting Control C. And so I just wanted to check on what it's doing because I was surprised it was already installed. It must be a thing that came along with some other dependency of mine, but that's great, even better. And so I'll say, actually, that looks good. Please continue. So I interrupted it, and I'm just going to tell it to keep going.
It's always cool to see other, like how people prompt tools, because I didn't know, like there's some stuff I was doing that might have been not optimal. I didn't know I can just tell it like keep going. I've been like,
Yeah.
oh man, now I gotta start over.
Yeah. Yeah, this like interruption thing I use all the time when I'm doing this like kind of interactive back and forth. And sometimes I'll let it go all the way till it's done and then check on what happened. But when I'm like actually like coming up with design decisions with it, definitely I'll interrupt it on the regular. Okay, so let's see what it's doing here. This is like kind of fine, but I actually think that there's a better way to do this. And so I think I'm going to interrupt it. And so now I'm going to do another thing that is useful with Goose, especially Goose today, which is I'm going to actually end this session because we got a lot done. I want to
Yeah.
check some of that in. And then I would like it to start over with this idea because I think it's gone in the wrong direction for a while, and it's easier to start fresh than it is to like try to pivot it in the middle of a conversation.
That makes sense.
So I'm going to head over to Git. I'm going to stage the existing changes so that I don't lose them. And so now if a new session of Goose makes changes, it's going to make them against the existing files. And I'm going to manually go over here and change this visualization.
Okay.
So I think it's better.
Memory, right? Sorry, go ahead.
What was that?
I was saying you're kind of like clearing its memory, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're just going to start over, and I'm going to change the args here, and that might be part of why it got stuck. And I'm going to delete the implementation. And then, so what I'm going to say is, so it's already made a good doc string for this. and we're going to say, I'm going to do a quick sanity check that it didn't hallucinate that. So I'm just going to do uplot minus h. I guess it doesn't have it dash h. And then, okay, here's another one I'll do. So I don't use awk often enough to be confident that I could make a good awk command to extract these, but I don't want to copy and paste all of them because I'm lazy. So I'm actually just using Goose as like a quick terminal tool here. I'm just going to, this is like a short-lived session. I just want it to get all of these formatted for me so that I can paste them in. So I'm just going to grab that string.
Okay.
And so now I can drop that into the code right here. And so now it's more correct. So, okay, so we fixed a small hallucination there, and I'm just going to discard that session, and we're going to start a new one. And like I mentioned, I deleted the implementation of this, and I changed the arguments. And so a new session is going to kind of forget what it was thinking about before and implement this. And so I'm going to say So I'm just going to remind it or tell it, because it's a brand new session, I have to like warm it up by saying we're working on a new toolkit in data.py. We want to now implement the visualize method. We want that to use subprocess to call out to uplot. I'll just say uplot and capture the output and return it from the tool. The args should be handled correctly. They might include strings. Okay, so I'm just kind of telling it like instead of like let's call out via subprocess. That's kind of where we already were. And then the thing I thought that it got wrong when I looked at the code before is that we should grab the output of the SQL query in a temporary CSV from DuckDB and then have uplot work against that file. And so before it was like kind of like grabbing the data from the result in the process, and I would rather just drop it into a temp file and clean it up when we're done. I think that'll be more general purpose.
That makes sense.
So let's see what it does with that. Yeah. Okay, and so like, you know, it's a new session, so it has to discover where all the content is. So it's going to like search for data.py, read the existing implementation. And this step right here is a big part of why I started over, because it forgot about all the stuff it was trying before and just read this new version where there's a placeholder to implement. And I'm going to stage these changes. Okay, cool. So let's just like take a quick look at what it's doing there. So it's replacing the existing implementation. And now it's doing what I was hoping for, which is like, we're going to just make a temp file and put it into a CSV. And then we're going to run uplot, pointing it at the file, which is good. And then we should get the output. I have one nit on this. So I'm going to let it run against that. But right here, this with block on the temp file would, I believe, oh, no, it did delete equals false. So actually it's right and I'm wrong.
Oh, no.
That's cool. Let's see. Nope. So it believed me. It actually had that right. But it fixed it in a correct way. So this is interesting.
Has it ever pushed back? Has it ever been like,
yeah,
nah,
it does.
Okay.
Yeah, especially the newer models. It'll be like, no, I'm sure. So it's interesting. So sometimes it believes you, sometimes it doesn't. So what's funny is it told me I was right, but then when it changed the code, it didn't really change anything, which is great. So like it did the right thing, and it was just being polite to me. It just moved this code from here to after the standard error handling, which doesn't actually matter. But anyways, that's cool. I'm glad it didn't like break anything because I told it the wrong idea. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so let's say now take a look at demo.py and please, or actually I need to fix that because I'm going to delete the old things it did, the old visualizations.
This is from before the uplot, or?
Yeah, exactly. So that was like the old implementation. I'm going to ask it now. So I'm going to try to see if we can get it to confirm it's actually working. Okay, and we're getting close on time. So let me hopefully this will be the last like piece.
Oh, you couldn't hear me. Sorry, I'm on mute. I was gonna say if you have to go somewhere, then we could wrap up, but I'm not in a rush. Just letting you know.
Okay, cool. If we need a couple extra minutes, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to do something in parallel while Goose is working on that, and that's often a thing I'll do. Is like we'll take responsibility of two different pieces, and so just like before with the query log, I'm going to also put a notifier for the human on the visualization output too, right? So let's do. Let's also make sure that the human sees the viz. And it's like loop in to fix some problems.
This is so cool. Like learning from you because you created it. I've been using Goose to like understand Goose. Like I'll be like, what's the exchange class doing?
Right. And I think it's like getting close. So so the query, like you can see what it's doing is like it's making a query that's going to get the like X and Y for the plot that it wants to make, and then it's going to do a line. And then this is like the uplot args. And let's see how far it is. It's like definitely making changes. I want to take a look at what it's doing here as well. So let's just see, like, because it's at the moment. Oh, okay. So it's like it's kind of working. The warning colon is a little bit funny, but that's the only real nit I got with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
so
looks
let's
dope,
end
though.
that. Yeah, like it's definitely doing stuff, which is pretty cool. Let's see how far that is if we actually turn on Goose with it. So let me try that out. It might be just that the demo code is like doing some extra stuff that we don't need to worry about, because this code actually looks pretty good to me. And so let me do. I'm going to open up my Goose configs, and we're going to make a new one that is going to use the new plugin we made. And so what we got to do here is add the data toolkit to our toolkits so that it has those tools we just built. And then another thing we got to do is just make sure that I don't remember if Goose did this or not. So the other thing is that this is like the Python plugin ecosystem. So we need to actually add an entry point to the plugin for it to become available. So it's just like the version with Artify. We just add this line here, and that makes it available to the plugin system. Okay. So we've got that.
For people that were viewing, you just added it to your profile.yaml, which is like the configuration like settings type of system. And then you also added it to, what's that thing called again? Like a PyProject TOML or something like that, which you just
the PyProject TOML.
Yeah. And it like gives the entry point to your toolkit. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so let's go ahead and start a session um, with the profile data. And so they did a little bit of a reinstall. Oh. So, okay, so this is good. So we didn't see that in the example testing because it's something that Goose does. But we have a small mismatch that Goose does as like kind of a sanity check on the toolkits. And that makes sense. So right here, we have arg singular, and then in the doc string, we had args plural, and they mismatched. So Goose just the plugin loading warned us about that. So that's a quick fix. This is a couple of other warnings that aren't fatal, but I'll just want to go fix them real quick. So these returns things are incorrectly formatted. I'm just going to delete them though, because they're not used by the model. So I don't care about them. Get rid of those. And again, this stuff, it's like faster for me to do than to ask Goose to do. So at that point, I just kind of do it myself.
I think that.
Yeah. And so I think let's do a demo. So I saw, yeah, this is nice. So uplot has these like short links to download CSVs. And let's do this one. So I'm going to go to this new Goose that has no history of what we've been working on. Can you download this data set and then tell me what is in it? And so if things are working, it's now got a tool to, like, it'll use its existing shell tool to curl that. It'll use its new tool to load it into SQL and then run some queries on it and then tell me what's up.
That's cool.
Okay, so we're seeing that message. This is the schema. So it's got, and it's running a query. So this is working. That's great. So we're seeing basically some island data sets. And it's like using the output of that query to like start to analyze what's going on. So it can say 48 different islands and continents, and it's got some measurement of their size. That's cool. And so let's visualize the largest sizes by continent and see if the visualization thing works. Okay, so now the visualization part that we weren't sure about, let's see what's up with that. We might be getting errors, and then I would try to fix them real quick. Okay, so it's if y'all don't mind staying 5 extra minutes, I think we can probably get a quick fix. So this is useful.
And after you do that, when it's running, someone has a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's running, and somebody said, so a toolkit is a prescription for the LLM to follow a little bit more structured, deliberate tool, function, and framework rather than always find the solution from scratch. They're asking.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess maybe even the like things you're thinking of as native to Goose are for sure like also toolkits. So like Goose by itself is just chat, and then the shell tool comes from a toolkit. But yeah, like you could kind of do anything you want with a shell tool and file edits. It just takes a long time. And so building a new toolkit like this kind of supercharges it with some shortcuts to doing SQL and visualizations.
And the shell command part or toolkit is like the developer toolkit, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
cool.
So the developer toolkit's what is what gives it its like baseline capabilities, and you pretty much always need it. And then these extras like give it new capabilities.
Okay, cool. And keep going. Don't feel rushed at all. I just put an hour just for your own time, not necessarily for mine.
For sure. And this is pretty close. I definitely the queries are working, which is fun. And then the visualizations I think are right about ready. And it's so now I made a quick bug fix. Okay, so it is visualizing. It's just that the result format wasn't right. So it's like kind of learning what it needs to do. Okay, that did not work. So it's not failing, but it's not also working. Um, we might have to come back to that.
That's okay.
Let's see if a line plot works instead. Yeah, that makes sense. There's nothing to plot there. Okay, so we're close.
Okay.
At this point, maybe we, just because we're about out of time, we would finish
Yeah.
that up. I'll probably make a PR out of this just because it's fun and we can see where it went to. I think the thing that we're missing right here is something in the sub process. Passing the arguments isn't working, so it's not actually doing the plotting correctly. So we're just missing a couple of debugging steps along the way from here.
Okay. This was cool to watch though. I think it like at least helped me get a better understanding of like how you would set up a toolkit and then also like how you would go back and forth with Goose to do it. It was interesting to see that you didn't really start necessarily from scratch. I'm curious if there are any last minute things you wanted to highlight, because after this, I'll probably just highlight like our repository and maybe some of the projects we have going on right now.
No, that's great. Yeah, definitely check out some of the repos in open source, and I'll try to get what we worked on here in Goose Plugins repo as a PR later today.
My camera always overheats. I'm gonna switch to like my really ugly Mac camera, guys. Okay, cool. Sorry, y'all. So, okay, cool. Thank you for showing us this. I do want to highlight. Let me take this off the screen. So this was really cool to see. I do want to highlight if you thought this was interesting, if you want to try using Goose out, or if you want to contribute to it. We do have a repo. github.com/blog/goose. So you can go ahead and check that out. We also have a plugins repo as well. Let me see if I can pull that up. It's more for, here it is. Let me add it right here. So we have github.com/block open source/goose/dash plugins. So you can go ahead and check that out as well if you wanted to add in your own like community-based plugin, whether it's a command or a toolkit, or there's another plugin provider, I think. So if you wanted to like maybe say, hey, I don't necessarily want to use this for OpenAI or with Claude, I have my own LLM that I want to try out. And then the other thing I wanted to tell you all about is we ran Hacktoberfest in October, and it was really good. But there's more opportunities for you to get awards for contributing to our Goose repo. So I wanted to tell you guys about like Goose November. You have the opportunity to win some monies, and a lot of the issues are like content based, so you don't necessarily need to be a strong developer for it. Just try out Goose and give us some of like your experiences, whether it's through a blog post or through like a video demo or something like that. We just want to see how you're using Goose, and so we can continue to make it better for you. I'll play a quick video of how it all works, and then we will wrap up for the day. All right, so that's it for. Oh, Brad, you're back. I was just gonna say thank you so much, Brad, for giving us your time, an hour, like a little bit over an hour. Really appreciate that. I don't know if you have any last words to say, but thank you also to the audience for tuning in, asking good questions. People said it was really insightful and they thought it was very interesting. So thanks, y'all. We'll be back next week. I'm hoping to stream with another coworker of mine. I think his name is Joe. So excited to see what he's working on as well. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Great to do this.
Alrighty, bye.